This week on The Record, Israel at war. And Congress is paralyzed until it hands someone a gavel. When will Republicans elect a speaker? And how should the U.S. respond to terror attacks against an ally? Former White House National Security Council Director Richard Goldberg joins us with analysis on the nation's foreign policy toward Hamas and Iran. Who will Congressman Mike Boss support for speaker? Plus, tragic deaths and violent outbreaks in the St. Louis City Justice Center. After Congresswoman Cori Bush called for change, which Republican is opening an investigation? It's all coming up right now. Welcome to The Record. I'm Mark Maxwell. One of America's closest allies is at war. Israel is a nation of 10 million people, and right now its defense forces are preparing some 300,000 armed troops for a significant ground incursion into Gaza, where tens of thousands of Hamas militants lie in wait. 1,500 of them breached the walls around Gaza 5 days ago, Hamas carrying out barbaric terrorist attacks, killing more Jews in one day than on any other occurrence since the Holocaust. Israel struck back with swift vengeance, leveling city blocks of buildings in Gaza. Hospitals and morgues are overflowing. Schools are preparing to shut down for remote teaching throughout Israel. Electricity and food are soon to be in short supply. And there are new reports today from the Associated Press that Israel launched airstrikes against airfields in Syria to its north. And Congress is paralyzed until it elects a speaker. More on that in a moment. But first, we turn to an expert on Israel and Iran, who served on the White House National Security Council under President Trump. Before that, Chief of Staff to former Illinois Governor Bruce Rauner. Richard Goldberg joins us now on The Record. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start by getting your news first to the your reaction to the news that broke just today that a federal grand jury has charged Senator Bob Menendez of acting as a foreign agent. The superseding indictment there says that he, quote, provided sensitive U.S. government information and took other steps that secretly aided the government of Egypt. We know Egypt shares a border with Gaza. Of course, we don't know yet what, if any, connection might exist between that information he handed and this war. But what does it tell you about the interest that foreign governments have in that region trying to seek leverage in D.C.?
Well, we know that a lot of countries in the region, especially those of any sort of wealth, tried to pump a lot of money into lobbyists into Washington. The Qataris come to mind, especially right now. Qatar, Doha, Qatar is home to the Hamas leadership. People don't realize that. People may have seen on social media there was a threat issued by the Hamas leader, a former Hamas leader, to potentially hurt Jews around the world on Friday of this week. That wasn't issued from Gaza. It was issued from Qatar. You wouldn't know that. They have a lot of friends that they've hired in Washington. So there's a lot of leverage, a lot of influence games from all countries, not just the Middle East, but all countries that have lawyers and lobbyists registered as foreign agents in Washington. Obviously, you've seen the news on Senator Menendez. Very sad that it would come to this point. We'll have to see how this plays out. It's the hands in the jury and in the court system right now, so we'll leave it there. But Egypt is on top of mind now, of course, sharing a border with Gaza. People think of just the Israel-Gaza border. Egypt has a border with Gaza as well, and a major responsibility right now. Prime Minister Netanyahu, you probably saw, called, along with the defense minister of Israel, Gazans who do not support Hamas, who do not want to stay around for whatever to come, to leave Gaza. And of course, everybody said, well, where are they supposed to go? Mm-hmm. And the answer is the Egyptians can open a humanitarian corridor, and they're refusing to do so right now. So we have a lot of...
What obligation does Egypt have to open its border and take in those refugees of this war?
Well, they've never wanted to in the past. Obviously, this is land that had been fought over for many years, previously controlled by the Egyptians, taken by the Israelis in the 1967 war, along with the Sinai Peninsula, which eventually was given back for the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt. But Egypt, understands that this is a terror threat to Egypt as well. They don't want to invite any terror cells into Egypt. They don't want to see instability. Obviously, the Muslim Brotherhood is the enemy of the regime in Egypt. We remember a decade ago of people in Tahrir Square bringing down the previous regime under Mubarak, and then having a Muslim Brotherhood government elected, and then the military coupping that government. And so Hamas is actually part of the Muslim Brotherhood. It's the one of the terror affiliates of the Muslim Brotherhood. So there's reasons why Egypt doesn't want to have any part of Hamas, any part of Gaza. At the same time, it does need to be a player here to open a humanitarian corridor and allow those civilians that do not support Hamas, that want to leave, that want to see a better future after Hamas is potentially destroyed and come back,
Mhm.
a place to go.
A lot of dynamics here. I want to ask you about that Qatari government piece. They're a key figure in this foreign policy decision. Right now, the Biden administration appears to be backpedaling on its decision to unfreeze $6 billion in Iranian assets released in exchange for American hostages. The U.S. Treasury says those funds are right now frozen in Qatari bank accounts. But Democrats on Capitol Hill, they say they want ironclad information Iran was not involved in the Hamas terrorist attacks in Israel. Is there any doubt in your mind that Tehran leveraged these funds in some way, perhaps borrowing against them to sponsor these attacks?
Yeah, I think whether or not this $6 billion was used by Iran for this specific attack is an irrelevant piece of information. I will take the administration at its word that it has not processed any of the money yet out of that $6 billion. The question is, if Iran is the sponsor, the coordinator, the director, the parent company, if you will, of Hamas, why are we giving them a nickel? Why are we letting them have any money available to them as budget support? And it's not just this $6 billion that we're talking about today that was recently moved to Qatar for their use. There was $10 billion moved over the summer from Iraq into Oman for Iran's use. And there's a lot of oil sanctions that aren't being enforced right now. So I think we're really under a reevaluation of the Biden administration's Iran policy in total, because while they have been pursuing a policy to try to restrain the nuclear program by opening up cash for the regime to try to keep them from crossing that nuclear threshold, what they've been doing also is freeing up cash for terrorism and other nefarious purposes. That's a tension in the policy right now in Washington, and that's really at the core of the debate.
Whether or not there was intelligence pointing a finger at Iran or at Tehran, there must have been some intelligence. American and Egyptian officials have both said that Egypt warned Israel about the impending attack days before it transpired. To what extent was this a failure of the Netanyahu government to blunt or deter these attacks?
Oh, I think this is a catastrophic failure on multiple levels throughout the Israeli system, and somewhat of an indictment of our own intelligence services here in the U.S. This is a very complex attack. It was well thought out. The documents that we're starting to see that have been posted in certain Telegram and other social media apps that have been taken off of the Hamas terrorists show just very detailed planning for months. They knew exactly where they were going. The type of techniques, the tactics they used, the paragliders, mortars dropping from drones, coming in from land, air, and sea. I mean, this does not just happen overnight. So the idea that for months something was being coordinated and something that complex, Hamas is not doing on its own. We saw the Wall Street Journal report that IRGC, this is the Revolutionary Guard Corps of Iran, their terror apparatus was training, was coordinating for this attack or other attacks in the future. Whether or not the top of the tier was involved, something should have been caught in the system a long time ago. How did they deceive Israeli intelligence, U.S. intelligence? That's a big question mark. And then we also heard about this Egyptian warning. Again, we don't know what warnings look like. A lot of times people send in warnings. We think something is going to happen. We can't tell you when or where, but we're seeing a picture. Now, is that what it was? Then, what are you supposed to do with that kind of information? If it was, we believe there's going to be 1,500 terrorists who try to come into your country on this night, and nobody does anything about it, yeah, that's a catastrophic failure. If it's just, we got something, that sounds more like the things that were happening before 9/11, where people were not connecting dots and didn't have a full picture. So this is the 9/11 of Israel. People have said that. And it's also the intelligence failure before 9/11, comparably.
There's also this security threat to the north of Israel near Lebanon and Hezbollah, the armed military group there. You worked for the Trump administration. What do you make of his remarks last night, calling Hezbollah, quote, very smart? Is that helpful?
No, they're not smart. This is an evil subsidiary of Iran. They are like Hamas, determined to kill as many Jews as possible if they ever get the chance. They have an even more lethal force than Hamas does. And remember, when you're talking about Hezbollah, you're not talking about Hezbollah. The president, unfortunately, gets it wrong. He's talking about Iran in this case. It's Iran that has been arming Hezbollah. It's Iran that's been coordinating Hezbollah in Beirut. And so Iran's been sending all these precision-guided munitions for years, building up a lethal force there on the northern border. And unfortunately, the Israelis have allowed that to metastasize over many years, and they have been deterred by that threat. I think that we are now seeing a point where, as they prepare to potentially go into Gaza, and Iran could open a multiple front conflict on the north as well, the Israelis are going to have to decide whether they are willing to take on that threat and what it's going to take down that threat. Obviously, we know about the Iron Dome system. You've seen that in the news. There are other missile defense systems that will be needed given longer range rockets and missiles that Hezbollah has. But because of the just breadth of the arsenal and the carnage that would come from those missiles raining down from Lebanon, you're going to have to see the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, use overwhelming force in Lebanon, potentially Syria, to bring that front to a close.
All right, Richard Goldberg, a lot more questions we could ask you. We're going to have to leave it there for now. Thank you for joining us. And coming up, Congressman Mike Bost on the race to replace Kevin McCarthy in the Speaker's chair.
What's the forecast in Florida?
What's it like in Belleville?
No matter where you are.
What's the forecast in St. Peter's?
Or how you get your weather.
We know you want the forecast for your backyard. And you want it now.
Right here and right now.
The 5 on your side, Weather First team. Focused on you.
Pentagon Chief Lloyd Austin is heading to Israel, where America's closest ally in the Middle East is under attack. The White House says it is rushing military aid and weapons to Israel as its military mounts its defenses for a major ground incursion into Gaza against Hamas. But Congress can't take any further action on new spending until it elects a speaker. Illinois Congressman and chair of the House Veterans Affairs Committee, Mike Bost, is now on the record. Members of the House received a classified intelligence briefing early Wednesday morning on those Hamas attacks in Israel. What new information do you have at the time of this conversation? And do we know who was responsible for flying those aircraft into northern Israel?
Well, what we know is that it was a planned organization. Intelligence is still digging deep to find out. It has the look, but we can't confirm that Iran was involved. The reality is that we believe that there were others at play and involved with this. But let's be real clear what this was. This was a terrorist attack. It wasn't a normal military move. It was a terrorist attack. You do not attack people who are celebrating holiday music fest and go in and start slaughtering people. You don't slaughter elderly women and rape young women and kill children. And you don't do that. That is a terrorist attack. So what we do know is 22 Americans have been killed in this process. Over 1,000 others are killed from Israel. Overall, we've got to make sure that we are in support of Israel. They are our allies, one of our greatest allies. I do agree with the administration in the fact that they quickly sent our aircraft carrier to send a strong presence right there. We do need to get the speaker elected and in place so that we can move forward. Regardless of what goes on from here, that is a reason why we should not have vacated the chair, because this type of situation, my biggest fear was something like this would happen when the chair was vacated. So we have to get the speaker back in place. We have to send a clear resolution from Congress and pass that. And we have to then make sure that we figure out together with the Senate and with the administration what needs to be done in support of Israel above and beyond what we were just talking about.
And we'll be watching all of that transpire closely in the days and months to come. A number of questions to get to about military policy and posture, but there's also the question of spending. And it seems like there might be some fractured ideas in the Republican conference right now about the allegiance or the amount of military spending. Congress did already give $3.8 billion to Israel to defend itself this year. So how could this happen with all that funding there, and how much more are you willing to spend to help Israel defend itself?
The actual House moved the 3.8. That was not moved out of the Senate yet. That is over in the Senate at this time. So I believe the Senate should take that up. And anytime we do that, we want to make sure that there's oversight of where that money's going. We've never had a problem with our best ally, with Israel, before.
As you alluded to a minute ago, Congress cannot lift a finger until it hands a gavel to a speaker. President Trump called on Republicans to nominate Jim Jordan. You voted for Steve Scalise in the conference and support his bid for speaker.
No one necessarily true. I will vote for Steve Scalise on the floor. when there were 113 that voted for Steve Scalise.
Including you,
So
no? Didn't Steve Scalise have your support?
Steve Scalise, I was in support of the one that came out.
Why was Donald Trump wrong to back Jim Jordan?
I don't say that Donald Trump was wrong. I won't say that. Because the thing is, he has his opinion on who he felt needed to be supported. There were many of us that did. The only thing about Jim Jordan is he is a very, very good conservative. I believe he is a wonderful member of Congress. I believe he's a wonderful person. And I believe his head's in the right place as far as his conservative.
So it sounds like you're saying he's in a better position to help the party and help the nation from his perch where he's at now. I want to move on to this next question, though. Darren Bailey, who's running against you in Congress this cycle, is attacking you for, quote, betraying Trump in favor of Scalise and the establishment. Your campaign published a photo of Bailey when he was running for governor, and he was in front of a Palestinian American group, standing in front of a big map of Israel, but it was named Palestine. Your campaign said it, quote, erased Israel from existence. Do you really think that photo op foible is indicative of Bailey's position on Israel's right to exist?
Let me tell you that he claimed he's 100% with Israel. If you're 100% with Israel, you wouldn't meet with a group like that. This is a policy issue. He's asking to become a person to deal with policy. Understand where your position is, and you don't stand in front of a map that takes Israel off the map. Now, I don't question him as far as his faith or anything like that. He's a man of faith. I'm a man of faith. But I do question if you claim you're 100% for Israel and you meet with a group that wants to see Israel completely taken out. The people that I'm working with to try to support Israel, the policy of working with them is beneficial for us. In their region, it's beneficial for us. It's beneficial for how we share intelligence. It's beneficial how we share the technology, military technology, the science that comes out of Israel that we get joint together with them is vitally important.
Sure.
So, he has to answer that question. I can't.
And we'll try to put that question to him. Your campaign said in that same statement, quote, we can't afford to elect weak politicians like Darren Bailey who will cut and run on our allies. You did just switch your vote against funding more military funding for Ukraine, another ally. How is that different? How is that different?
So I'll explain. I have supported Ukraine funding twice. What we found out, and that's one thing that my opponent doesn't get, is the briefings on things that are going on. What we found out is there's some abuses of those monies because we don't have oversight. So I refuse to give my vote for more money for Ukraine until we have oversight and know that it is being directed where? To the beans, bullets, and band-aids that allow them to take the fight to the Russians. I think that's the right thing to do for the taxpayer, and I am very happy to explain that vote.
Will you apply that same standard to Israel? And I ask it under this context. Yes, Ukraine has suffered a rash of corruption there. So too has the Netanyahu government. Do you trust that that money is being used the way it's supposed to? How can you assure that?
Because we have oversight and have a close relationship with Israel to make sure that's done. And we've been doing it a long time with Israel. We know where it's going. Israel, not that Ukraine isn't a good ally, don't get me wrong. We've got a long time standing friendship since the beginning of Israel. There are two different things. As a member of Congress, you have to weigh those things out, and I've weighed those things out, and I'm more than willing to stand before my constituents and explain that anytime.
The last quick policy question, do you support the two-state solution?
I do not. No, and I don't believe, and I think this is the problem. As we're trying to work through peace in the area, it's awful hard to work through peace in the area when what just happened this last weekend. And I think this kind of proves that one side really doesn't want peace.
We'll have to leave it there. Congressman Mike Boss, maybe we'll see you on the campaign trail. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Meanwhile, the city jail is increasingly a dangerous place back in St. Louis. Congresswoman Cori Bush recently cited grave concerns after 3 detainees died within a 10-week span there, reaching a death toll of 10 people in 2 years. Congresswoman Bush writing a letter to Corrections Commissioner Jennifer Clemens Abdullah, writing, quote, I've been appalled by the reports regarding the use of force at CJC, the City Justice Center, specifically the use of chemical agents on detainees. Just last week, we asked Mayor Tashara Jones to respond to the letter from Congresswoman Bush. Do you still have confidence in the director?
So the changes at the city jail are happening under the leadership of Jennifer Clemens Abdullah, who I still have confidence in. This is a difficult situation, and she chose to move here with her family to take on making these changes in the CJC. We have spent almost $20 million fixing the locks, upgrading the meals, and upgrading services and educational services in the city jail. But these kind of changes don't happen overnight because there have been problems there for decades, and you can't expect it to change under one person over 2 years. And also, she's doing this with a staff, as many that she needs. And I don't see people knocking down our doors to be corrections officers. Being a corrections officer is a hard job. We're also trying to increase their salaries as well to make it an attractive job for people to take, for people who want to be interested in being a corrections officer with the city of St. Louis. And we're hiring, by the way.
Missouri State Auditor Scott Fitzpatrick is now investigating the City Justice Center under an initial review. Auditor Fitzpatrick is now on the record, joining us remotely from Utah, where he's on the road right now. Mr. Auditor, your letter to the mayor lists concerns about mismanagement, lack of inmate medical care, inadequate inmate nutrition due to non-payment of vendors, and a failure to respond to oversight efforts by the City of St. Louis Detention Facilities Oversight Board. If, at the end of your investigation, you conclude your audit and find all of those things are in fact true, what tools do you have to improve the conditions?
Well, an audit is exactly what it sounds like. It's a report on what is actually going on, in a particular entity. And in this case, it would be the corrections center. And really at that point, then it would be a tool that the Board of Aldermen could use, or the DFOB themselves could use, to try to get clarity as to what they are allowed to do. Based on the initial review, or I think that they've been denied access, probably improperly, to the facility, and are not being allowed to carry out their function. We don't have enforcement authority per se to demand that the mayor change her policies or practices, but if we do determine or conclude that she is violating the statute, or the administration's violating the ordinance, then we'll highlight that, and the folks in the city will have to figure out where to go from there.
I wonder how much access you'll have. I want to ask you about the origin of this investigation, though. Your letter says in the first sentence that it was State Senator Steve Roberts, a political rival of the mayor, who brought these concerns to the attention of your office. Can any legislator or politician trigger an audit, or is this one just another routine function of your office?
Senator Roberts did not request any to be anonymous. So we were able to, make clear who made that initial allegation. That being said, we've also received concerns from members of the DFOB as well. So it's not solely Senator Roberts. You don't have to be a legislator or a member of a board to send a complaint into the auditor's office. Any citizen that has concerns with the operation of a governmental entity in the state of Missouri can send an anonymous whistleblower tip to the state auditor's office. You can choose for it to be anonymous or not.
Do you have confidence in the director of the jail?
Well, listen, I don't know the director of the jail. This is all fairly new information to us. So we're going to conduct the investigation. We've already begun, as you know, sending requests for information from the folks involved. And the mayor's office will probably work with the jail to get us the information we've asked for. And then we'll make a determination. But I've never met the person in charge of the jail. I have no pre-existing opinion on their qualifications.
But Auditor Fitzpatrick, thank you for joining us. And before we go, let's take a moment to quickly check the record. Some leaders in Washington are beating the drums of war. Yes, our ally Israel is under attack. The images are horrific. The reality even worse. And emotions are running high. 2 days ago, U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham went on cable news and called to, quote, level Gaza, claiming we were in a religious war. So we're going to check the record back in 1957, when President Dwight Eisenhower said, quote, war is the deadly harvest of arrogant and unreasoning minds. He said war is mankind's most tragic and stupid folly. But America's last general to serve in the White House also said this: all history has taught us the grim lesson that no nation has ever been successful in avoiding the terrors of war by refusing to defend its rights, by attempting to placate aggression. Our leaders have some difficult decisions ahead indeed, and we'll continue to explore their ideas and press them to explain them in the weeks to come. We should note we did invite Darren Bailey to come on our program this week. He was unavailable. That does it for us. We'll be right back here online at 6:45 next Thursday night. Until then, we're off the record.